Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Sandeep Sharma. I'm the Manager of Operations Planning in ERCOT. Before I start my presentation, I want to thank the host for inviting me here to share our experience. I'll start my presentation by providing some background information of ERCOT, and then renewable integration practices and solution at ERCOT, and some of our future challenges. Now, ERCOT ISO, our independent system operator, was created by Texas Congress in 1999, and primarily we have 4 different responsibilities. The number one being maintain system reliability. The second one is competitive wholesale market. Third is open access to transmission. And then the fourth one is competitive retail market. ERCOT ISO is one of the is one of the 3 interconnection in North America. It is not connected with either Eastern Interconnection or Western Interconnection. So the only way we are connected with Eastern Interconnection is via DC tie. We're also connected by a DC tie with Mexico. And so the challenges of ERCOT would be very similar to the challenges that you'd see in India, at least the stability side and reliability side. So again, I went through this, so I'll skip this one and skip this one too. So I'll spend a few minutes here on this slide because it's important to understand the market structure that...
Mr. Sandeep, for a change, you don't skip anything. You cover everything. We have time.
Okay,
we'll
all right.
Yeah.
I get frightened with that clock. Okay, so in ERCOT, we have energy-only market. And what happens is market participants, they bring generation online. And ERCOT, being a reliability coordinator, can bring additional generation online to maintain reliability. And market participants, they submit offers. So there's a day-ahead market, and then there's a real-time market. The day-ahead market is voluntary, and market participants can submit virtual bids. And then there's a real-time market. Real-time market is security-constrained economic dispatch that runs every 5 minutes. And we dispatch wind, and we dispatch every other generation resources. Prices received by generators signal whether more or less generation or less output from those generation is needed. So there's a system lambda, and then generators that are receiving a price is lower than that system lambda generally signals the fact that less output is needed. And then if the prices the generators are receiving is higher than the system lambda, then it signals to the generator that more power is needed from those generators. And then we procure ancillary service in day-ahead market. So to provide some context with respect to ERCOT, our peak demand was made on August 11th, 2016, 71,110 megawatts. Our weekend record was made in July of this year, 68,000 megawatts. Our winter peak record is 59,650, was made on January 6th. If you look at our peak demand, generally all of our peak demand is made in summer across hour 4 to 5 p.m. Wind generation record, instantaneous record, highest output was 16,141 megawatts, which was made March of this year at about 9 p.m. Penetration, load served by wind instantaneously was 50% of load was served by wind on March 23rd at 3:50 a.m. when ERCOT system load was 28,780 megawatts. And on this side, you'll see our monthly peak demands. So our summer is our peak time. Now we do have a winter peak, but winter peak is generally lower than summer. Our wind season are generally spring and fall. That's when a lot of wind is there. If you look at annual energy and peak demand, again, the energy usage in ERCOT ERCOT is only one of the ISOs where there is energy growth year over year, every year. Now this year, we did not make a new peak, so the 71,110 megawatts still stands. Now this is an interesting slide. Somebody asked me about the generation mix change in ERCOT this morning. If you look at 1999, 50% of our installed capacity was gas steam. Today, it's about, as of 2015, it's about 13.8%. If you look at renewables, it was 0.008%. As I speak, as of 2015, it's 17.4%. It should be higher than that as of 2017. Coal, 25% versus 20.9%. Nuclear, 8% versus 5.4%. And so the most interesting thing here is the gas, CT, and combined cycle. It used to be 5%. Today, it's roughly 37%. And what that does is it provides us with a lot of flexibility. A lot of talks we had this morning was about as you add more renewable, there's a challenge with regards to flexibility. And one of the things that we're blessed with is the large penetration of gas and gas units that provides extreme flexibility for us. So this chart gives you an overview of wind growth over last 15, 16 years. And as of 2017, as of right now, we have about 20,000 megawatts of wind that is connected to grid. And by the end of this year, we expect to be somewhere around 21 to 22 gigawatts. And you can see over the next several years, we are expecting to add a lot more wind. Solar, we don't have a lot of solar, but we have seen some growth in solar. Compared to 2016, right now, we have about 800 megawatts of installed solar. And then by the end of next year, we expect to be somewhere around 15 to 1,600 megawatts of solar. But a lot of growth that we expect to see in future, in 2025, 26, most of that is coming from solar, which is not covered here. So from renewable integration perspective, I put this slide here because I think there are 4 pillars that are necessary for reliable and efficient renewable integration. Both reliable and efficient, that's the key word. So grid code, it all starts with grid code. If you have forward-looking grid code, then those grid codes what that translates to it translates to efficient and reliable operation in real time. If you have renewable forecast that's accurate, then the uncertainty associated with those forecasts is the only thing that you have to worry, and that can be covered by ancillary services, which again adds to reliable operation in real time. So with that, I'll briefly go over some of the grid code requirement in ERCOT. In ERCOT, whether it's a wind generation or a thermal generation, every generator is required to provide frequency response. Reactive capability and voltage right-through requirement are required on renewable resources. There's a ramp rate limitation. It used to be 10% of the installed capacity per minute, but as we were more comfortable with the wind operation, we increased that to 20%, which means in 5 minutes, a wind farm can ramp from 0 to 100% of its output. So the requirement that we have in ERCOT is that all generation, whether it's wind or non-wind, has to have a 5% droop setting, and with a dead band of no more than 17 millihertz. And then as of 2015, we had a regional NERC standard that actually requires generators to have these settings. The voltage right-through requirements, the generators, the wind farms are required to ride through the faults if the timing of the fault is such that it falls within the shaded area. Ramp rate limitation, again, it's 20% now, used to be 10%. So next piece that I want to talk about is renewable forecast. So in ERCOT, we have a vendor that provides us with the wind forecast for every wind farm that is operating within ERCOT. And the main idea behind getting that forecast is to integrate the forecast with our market systems. And what happens is we get the forecast every hour for next 168 hours. Those forecasted numbers are automatically submitted as a schedule. We call it COPS, but I think in the context of here, I'll use the word schedule. Those becomes the schedule of the wind farms, and those schedules are submitted in our market systems, and we dispatch other generators. We commit other generators around those wind forecasts so that we meet the load in real time. Now, prior to us, I think this is important, I need to state that, because prior to us doing the centralized forecast for all the wind farms, the resource entities were responsible for doing their own forecast and providing us with a schedule. And we used to get the schedule equal to install capacity most of the hours, and so therefore we could not live with that system, and we decided to take the responsibility for doing the forecast, and we hired a vendor to do the forecast for us. So our day-ahead error, if you look at 2013, 14, 15, and 16, 2015 and 16, we have seen improvements, and it's primarily because of our vendors, changing the modeling and changing the statistical model. Now, our day-ahead error is roughly around 6% for the day-ahead. For hour ahead, it's about 4%. It is important to understand these because we buy ancillary service, to meet the uncertainty associated with the day-ahead forecast error. So any improvement in forecast translates to reduced cost of integrating renewable resources. So ancillary services. So we have 3 different types of ancillary services: regulation service, responsive reserve service, and non-spinning reserve service. So regulation is primarily to balance the system frequency or system load every 4 seconds. We have a security constraint economic dispatch that runs every 5 minutes, and as generators are chasing those base points, any deviation is matched by regulation service. We also have quantified the impact of additional 1,000 megawatts, wind. What is the impact of every 1,000 megawatts of wind added to the regulation service? And what we see is it's anywhere from 12 megawatts to -2 megawatts. In some hours, your regulation actually gets reduced because you have more wind. In some hours, it increases. But for every 1,000 megawatts, it's anywhere from -2 megawatts to 12 megawatts for reg up, and -2 or -4 megawatts to 10 megawatts for reg down. So wind does not have 1:1 effect on regulation ancillary service. And what you'll see is as we have added more wind, our ancillary service requirement have declined for some hours. You'll see that in some of the later slides. So non-spinning reserve service, this is the primary service that we use to mitigate our risk associated with uncertainty of renewable resources. It's a 30-minute product. Wind and load forecast error is one of the inputs. Now, the net forecast uncertainty is the risk that we are trying to meet. Now, we have introduced the concept of net load ramp risk, or risk of net load ramp. And what that really means is our risk is highest. For ERCOT, our risk is highest when the load is going up, is ramping up, and wind is ramping down. That's when, if the forecast error is highest, we would be we have to plan around those errors. And so as of 2015, we changed our non-spinning, the way we procure our non-spinning, and we started looking at only wind over forecast and load under forecast. And this is the quadrant that we focus on for procuring non-spinning. And as a result, our non-spinning requirement, which used to be a flat number of 1,500 megawatts for all hours, started to look more like this. Some hours, when the risk from renewables is low, we buy as low as 800 megawatts. Hours, when there is a higher risk of net load ramp and the forecast error, we buy as high as 2,400 megawatts. Overall, we were able to reduce 20% of the non-spinning ancillary service in 2015 when we changed to this method. Responsive reserve, again, it's primarily designed to protect ERCOT under-frequency load shed for a 2 nuclear unit trip. And it's provided by generators. Partially, it's provided by generators that can provide primary frequency response. And it is also provided up to 50% of responsive reserve can come from demand response. That has activated an under-frequency relay, and it trips at 59.70 hertz. And that full response is available within 0.5 seconds. And since 2015, we have started procuring responsive reserve based on projected system inertia. And the primary reason for system inertia is the initial rate of frequency decline is defined by inertia. During the low inertia hours, you need more reserves. During high inertia hours, you need less reserves. And that's the reason by procuring dynamically, instead of one fixed amount for full year, we were able to procure right amount, increased amount in some hours, and then lower amount during other hours. And overall, we ended up being more reliable, but saved a lot of cost. So again, I talked about this. Load provides responsive reserve, and then primary frequency response from generators can provide responsive reserve. We did a lot of studies, and according to our studies, what it said is if you did not have load demand response, for a lowest inertia condition of 100 gigawatt second, you need responsive reserve equal to 7,350 megawatts. For highest inertia conditions, you need 2,140 megawatts. But if you have load resources integrated, then all you need is 3,788 instead of 7,350 for case 1, and then 2,140. Basically, what it's showing is during the low load condition, the faster response from load is more valuable, and each megawatt of load or demand response is 2.35 times is 2.35 times more valuable than the PFR megawatt from generators. Again, I've talked about this. And so what we started seeing is as our inertia continues to decline, our ancillary service requirement would exponentially increase. And we do monitor inertia in real time as of beginning of last year. And this shows our inertia heat map. Our highest inertia is generally during June through September across peak hours, and then the low inertia is during the shoulder months, January, February, March, April, across midnight to 4 a.m. And then this is how our responsive reserve requirement translated for 2017. Our highest requirement are during the lowest inertia hours, and our lowest requirement are during the highest inertia hours. Real-time operation. Now, I talked about the grid code, I talked about the forecast, I talked about the ancillary service. Now, all those things I talked about, previously was so that we could operate the grid reliably. So in real time, in ERCOT, what happens is wind farms, they receive base point from security constraint economic dispatch. Every 5 minutes, they receive base point. Absent transmission curtailment, absent transmission issues, wind farm can operate at whatever level the wind is blowing. Now, if there is a transmission constraint, then SCED, Security Constraint Economic Dispatch, will issue a base point which is going to be lower than their output, and at that point, they have to back down. And then the deviation is only calculated when the wind farms are being curtailed, whenever there is a transmission issue. Otherwise, there is no deviation charge for wind or solar. So this chart again shows the operations of a single wind farm in real time. The dotted blue here is the curtailment flag. Once the curtailment flag is issued, the black line is the wind base point. So the base point decreases here. And then the red line is the telemetered megawatts, and you'll see the wind farm dropping its output. And it will remain curtailed. And then once the curtailment flag goes away, then the wind farm is allowed to come back and operate at its at the level at which the wind is blowing. Now, frequency control, why it is important? Again, wind farms are not required to spill wind in real time to provide frequency response, but if they are curtailed in real time, for transmission region and unit trip happens, then they are required to provide frequency response. And this is the frequency response. The red is frequency. It dropped because of a unit trip, and then the wind farm responded, and then it came back as the frequency was recovering. Okay? So there's another graph. Again, this is for high frequency. So generally, wind farms, they respond really well, and they respond all the time for high frequency events. We had an event where we lost a load. Our frequency spiked to 60.05, and you got an instantaneous response from wind. There's another event which happened early this year. We had a big event where we lost a big unit. Frequency dropped as low as 59.8, and then wind provided frequency response. And then look at the recovery. This is just few seconds. Within few seconds, our frequency came back from somewhere around 59.8 to closer to 59.94. If we had a little bit more wind curtailed, we would have recovered the event in less than 30 seconds. So that's why it's important to have a grid code that states voltage requirement, frequency requirement, write-through requirement, so that in real time, if there is a system disturbance, you can write through those. CPS1 control, for those of you who don't know the CPS1, it's a NERC standard that basically measures how closely you are matching your load with demand. So how closely you are able to follow 60 Hertz. And ERCOT's CPS1 score has seen steady rise as we are adding more and more variable renewable energy sources. And so as I speak, we have right now about 175 megawatts of a rolling 12-month score, which is one of the best score in North America. So again, this slide shows our CPS1 score in red and our wind installation in blue. So as we're adding more wind, our CPS1 score is improving, our frequency control is improving, which means we're balancing well and we're controlling frequency tightly. Another slide that shows as we are adding more wind, as our CPS1 score continues to increase, we actually have a lower requirement on ancillary service. And this is happening while we are adding more and more wind. So this is again with the wind install capacity, which is the blue bar, and then the average hourly reg-up requirement, which is the red line. As we are adding more wind, our regulation ancillary service requirement is going down. Okay? So this is contrary to a lot of people thinking that as you add more wind, your ancillary service increases, and that may not always be true. It depends on how you are integrating. Future challenges, I'll spend less than a minute on this slide. Again, we have a lot of future challenges. We have a lot of wind that is connected to our weaker part of our systems. For example, Panhandle is one of the area where we're adding a lot of wind, but we do not have any load there. So it's wind that's being transported to DFW area via a long transmission line. So we have a voltage stability limit there. Extreme weather condition. As we are adding more wind, as we are depending more on wind, there are extreme weather events like icing or even, Harvey was there last week, Hurricane Harvey, and so we had to shut down some wind farm, and so we are now more cautiously looking at some of the extreme weather events, and we have started, to integrate some of their parameters into our forecasting. Low inertia condition, I've talked about this, and there are various different ways we can address low inertia, but that is one of the, being a island grid like ERCOT, inertia will continue to be an issue that we'll be discussing, but there are a lot of solutions and there are ways to mitigate inertia. And I talk a lot about synthetic inertia from wind. Wind can be a part of solution and can mitigate the inertia issue for island grid like ERCOT. That's all I had. Thank you.